We're looking in our Wonderful Day in the Lord broadcast at promises this week that deal with the spiritual dimensions of our life, the living for Christ. And we've looked at several different topics underneath that umbrella. Today we're going to look at in Matthew chapter 6, starting with verse 31. And the subject has to do with anxiety or worry. All of us are anxious at times, and the Lord knew that would be the case. Some are really controlled by anxiety. Worry controls them to the extent that their whole life is just one ball of anxiety. How sad such people are. And but all of us deal with it to some degree or the other. And we have a lot of things to be worried about today. I don't think any of us would question that because we live in a world of a lot of uncertainty, from political to national to international to financial to health issues to children issues to conflicts to work. There's just always something to be upset about and to be worried about it. And so we could easily live our whole lives in constant tension, constant anxiety, to the point that life is pretty miserable for us. And sadly, many people live like that, and unfortunately, some Christians do as well. Now, Jesus knew this, and he was talking to his disciples in Matthew chapter 6 on what we call the Sermon on the Mount. And he recognizes a level of anxiety among these men over a lot of very natural things, eating and drinking and living and clothing and things that were very much part of their life and culture. And he's concerned about that for them. So he lays down for them eternal principles. These are principles and teachings that they needed and that we need and will always need. And interlaced in those principles are going to be some very important and beautiful promises that sustain us in our time of grief or anxiety or worry. So let me look at these verses with you, starting with verse 31. Do not worry then, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear, or clothing? So he says, these are things that I know you're anxious about. And, we live in a somewhat different world. Most of us don't get too worried about our next meal or our next drink or our next set of clothing. Even the poorest of us in America have those things at our fingertips most of the time. But they lived in a world with very few safety nets. And a bad harvest, a drought, oppression by Roman soldiers or whatever could put them in a situation where they really did not have meals, where they could not have clothing and so forth. So it's very much part of their world. And he said, don't worry about those things. And he says, for all these things the Gentiles eagerly seek. So by Gentiles, he's speaking of unbelievers, those who did not follow Christ. He says, all the world seek these same things. But more than that, he says, for your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. So God is not oblivious to our needs. And he's not saying that these things are unimportant. These are the very fundamentals of life, right? The staples of life. We need food, we need drink, we need shelter, we need clothing. These are the things the essentials of life. And he says God knows that. He's not uncaring. He's not oblivious. He knows that. So he's not dismissing these issues as such. But he says in verse 33, but seek his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So he says, look, rather than seeking after clothing and food and so forth, things that are essential for human life, he said your priority should be seeking the kingdom, his kingdom, and his righteousness. And that is metaphors, I think, to a certain degree, as well as direct teaching about what is important in life. Seek his kingdom. That should be your priority. That should be what is most important in your life, even more important than food and drink and clothing. Yes, we have to have those things to sustain human life. But it is possible that the Lord has decided in your life that this is it for you, that human life will no longer be sustained. But that does not mean he does not love us and care for us in his way. It might be your time to go home to be with him. We all have that time. The Lord doesn't abandon us. He is with us. And he goes on to say this wonderful promise. And when we seek his kingdom and his righteousness, when that is the priority of our life, all these things will be added to you. And so he's promising us that he is going to meet our needs as he sees fit. As I just said, there could come a time when the Lord sees that what we need is to be taken home to be with him. That this life is no longer, that the next life is, we will now enter into that. But he has not abandoned us. He knows you need all these things. All these things will be added to you as he sees fit. So I don't know what the Lord has for me tomorrow. I don't know what he has for you in the future. I don't know his plan on all of that. But I do know he's called us to seek him and his kingdom and his righteousness, first of all, above all things, even the essentials of life. And then his promise, as he says, all these things will be added to you. And I think that is as he wills, as he chooses, he will add these things to our lives. We don't need to worry about these things. He's in charge of that. He knows our needs. He will supply our needs according to his resources in all eternity and according to his great love for us. Our job, our task is to follow him and to seek his kingdom. He promises to take care of us as he sees fit, and his ways are always the best. I hope this gives you a wonderful day in the Lord, and we'll pick this up again next week and look at a few more promises.